There are three things the Arizona Cardinals must do in 2024. First up, Kyler Murray.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cardinals, Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner _. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I've been here in Phoenix doing sports radio since 2011, hosting this podcast since 2017. Thank you for being a part of this next chapter as training camp is finally here. And I say finally here kind of loosely. Hasn't been that bad. This offseason, it seems like things are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And while it seems that, football's a long way away when the Super Bowl ends, it's really not that bad. There's so many different things on the calendar that keeps us occupied with content. And yeah, sometimes you got to pull rabbits out of a hat and do some more future pacing topics. But we're here with training camp, and I think it's the perfect time to kind of transition from what we could see, what should happen, what the expectations are going to be, which I'm going to dive more into tomorrow and later this week, peppering in, some things from camp. But really in camp, you don't learn an exorbitant amount, at least early on. What you want to avoid is the, oh no, he's not ready moments, which I'll touch on in a different show, most likely tomorrow. But there are three musts. This isn't last year anymore. This isn't all, when this happens. When this happens, then we can have this conversation. The whens is now. Then we can have the conversations. That's now. Today's episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So I'm going to highlight three position groups where the musts are most important for 2024, and it starts today. First day of camp, this is when it starts. Third, defense. Final segment. The defense must. I'll discuss what they must do. The offensive line, second segment, must. I'll discuss what they must do. And you're wondering, if you're watching YouTube, you're looking and seeing, it's only the offensive line and the defense and who I'm going to be talking about, Kyler Murray in the first segment. What about, James Conner and Marvin Harrison Jr. and everybody like that? You'll hear them folded in as they're directly correlated to specific topics that I'll be discussing. So you'll see. The first thing, though, for the Cardinals to improve upon 2024, Kyler Murray must take that 0-1 jump back into the first half of the 2021 season where we saw him at a fringe all-pro MVP level. And he doesn't need to go all the way. He doesn't need to lead the league in rushing for a quarterback. He doesn't need to lead the league in passing. He doesn't need to throw the most touchdowns. He doesn't need to do any of that. The Cardinals don't even have to make the playoffs. Okay? But the 0-1 jump Kyler Murray needs to take is playing, showing that there is without a shadow of a doubt that he's the guy for this team for the future. He's gotten every excuse, every reason in the book, and I've been spouting them forever. Whether it was Cliff Kingsbury, injuries, offensive line, offensive skill position players, defense not playing up to, natural reasons as to why football teams don't win more games than they lose. That's all gone now. And it's not they must make the playoffs or it's a bust of a year. It's not they're guaranteed to make the playoffs. Those thought processes are way premature. They're a lot more fan-driven, in my opinion, than actual rational thought, which is fine. You want your team to make the playoffs. That's not a backhanded anything. You want your team to make the playoffs. The team that you are fans of. For me, I have what's fiduciary when it comes to sports media? I have a duty to think rationally for you. So the playoff or bust, or the Cardinals are going to make the playoffs, it's not time yet. And if they do, and there's a path to, I discussed it last week, that's great. That's not saying the 2023 Arizona Cardinals were going to make the playoffs. Like, obviously, they're closer to that, finish line than where they were last year. But I still think that it's putting unnecessary pressure on a team that is still in transition. Having said that, there are concrete expectations. There are concrete, these things must happen for the Cardinals to continue to move the ball, bouncing ball down the road. And number one, Kyler Murray must shut up the naysayers forever. And there's going to be naysayers. There's going to be people like that. Even Josh Allen is thrown under, a microscope. Like, Josh Allen's not good. Like, everybody's going to have those people. But Kyler Murray needs to be, through his actions, through his play on the field, and everything in between, the guy. And the tough thing that it's going to be, the tough thing for people to absorb, that most likely will happen in 2024, is his numbers aren't going to be gaudy every week. They won't need to be. Sure, he'll have weeks like he did with Philly last year where they were matting on easy numbers. Absolutely. Sure, he'll probably have 2 or 3 games this year with 4 total touchdowns. He's not going to need to do that anymore. But what he's going to need to do, which is almost more important than that, is manage the game better than he ever has. And he's going to be in the most, I use the term metronome, even though it's not real, the most just calm, structured, stenciled offense that he's ever been in before. And this time for a full season with more talent than he will know what to do with. He's just going to have to do it. And everything that we've seen since he tore his ACL lends you to think, or lends me to think, you can think how you want. You're your own people. Lends us to think that it's going to happen. And it's going to happen without a hitch. Obviously, everybody's human. There's going to be mistakes made. There's going to be all that stuff. Like, come on. But for everybody in my comments, and I'm not saying this is like a challenge, like, oh, the people in my comments, blah, blah. No, that's not it. Everybody who has had their reservations about Kyler Murray, this is the time where they're going to thrive or where they're going to dissipate forever. And this isn't a segment saying Kyler Murray needs to shut up his haters. Not even close. That would be a byproduct of what Kyler Murray needs to do, must do in 2024 for the Arizona Cardinals to continue down this positive trajectory. Because if Kyler Murray, and I'm not saying this will happen, I'm not even thinking that it will, but if Kyler Murray regresses in any sort of substantial way this year, we're going to be having very different conversations. Having said that, everything is pointing towards the opposite of that happening, which means moving the ball down the road, which means the Cardinals winning 7 or 8 games this year, which means the playoffs are right around the corner, which means Kyler Murray's the guy. And he's going to be looked at as an absolute bargain with the contracts that he got, when Jordan Love is going to get $50 million or $55, or whatever it's going to be. It's going to be insane. And it's only going to get worse. A perfect case scenario for this organization is this first segment of Kyler Murray musts coming true, because everything else falls into place so much more simply. The offensive line is going to have a direct impact on Kyler Murray's ability to make that 0-1 jump into bona fide franchise quarterback without a question. What a little intricacies. What is that going to look like? I'll discuss it next when we roll on here, Locked On Cardinals. Your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by, FanDuel. We love FanDuel. And I love sports. I love them so much that I never wanted to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. And all I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a booster and bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody, every day, all summer long. You want to take a little free bet, put it on who's going to win the NBA championship, get ahead of the odds before the season starts months down the road? You can. Who's going to win the NFC West? Who's going to be most improved player? Like, FanDuel's got you covered with all of it. And just because, or if you love baseball, It's like March Madness. You got it every day, all day long until, October. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So musts, expectations, needs, things like that, all of these words can be, grouped together under one umbrella. But when put into certain context, some mean more things than others. Expectations are you aggressively hope this will happen. Musts are this needs to happen or it won't. Or your desired outcome won't exist. And Kyler Murray cannot be a liability. And at times he has been. Let's be honest. Come on. He has been perfect. I'm a Kyler Murray side of the aisle in the sense that it was Cliff Kingsbury's down, like Cliff Kingsbury. The Kyler Murray won despite of Cliff Kingsbury. That's the line I used a lot. And now it's not even Kyler Murray wins because of Drew Petzing and Jonathan Gannon. It's Kyler Murray wins with Drew Petzing and Jonathan Gannon, which is the best of all worlds. Now we just need to see more of it. And we'll see it for a full season, barring any sort of injury. That's another thing that I won't discuss. It's always, a part of, well, what if he gets injured? I mean, anybody could get injured at any time. And I know that that's a throwaway statement, but we can discuss that. Best ways for Kyler Murray not to subject himself to situations where he get injured. But even then, he tore his ACL in the open field. He's worked out a lot. You strengthen your muscles around the bones. You strengthen your muscles around the tendons. Ideally, that keeps you from getting injured more. But that's for a conversation before the season starts. The offensive line must stay healthy. The offensive line must yield cohesion immediately. Paris Johnson Jr. must work on the left side. Jonah Williams must work on the right side. Will Hernandez must replicate last season. Jalti Froholt must replicate last season. And whoever they play at left guard cannot be a liability. And while that may be to some like speaking in platitudes, like, well, that's not all that's going to happen. I mean, these guys aren't all pro. They don't have to be all pro individually. They've got to be above average collectively. This year, the offensive line will be under the spotlight more than ever. Because now the Cardinals have the skill position players everywhere, coming out of their ears. And if Kyler Murray doesn't have time, ain't none of it going to work. So just like Kyler Murray's last stint, towards the tail end of last season, when he really started to get his legs under him and, get to know the offense and things like that. That's what you're going to need to see all season this year from the offensive line. Now, Kyler Murray has the ability to elude oncoming pass rushers better than 90% of other quarterbacks. So you're going to have that out. You're going to have that, Houdini act of Kyler Murray. But that's not something like it was for a large portion of his first 4 years in the league. Something to be relied upon. It's not something that subconsciously or consciously or, due to poor roster construction, whatever it may be, talent evaluation, it can't be something that is anchored to that's how the Cardinals are going to put up points and win games. And just like Kyler Murray potentially regressing this year, I don't see the offensive line regressing either. I feel like Paris Johnson Jr. would have had to have had a much worse rookie season for him to be looked at as a liability going into 2024. And these are inexact sciences, sure. But when you look at a guy like Isaiah Adams, who they drafted in the middle rounds, who looks to potentially be a plug-and-play guy at left guard, like That was the biggest liability, left guard last year. The right side was at worst average, at worst. The offensive line must stay healthy. The offensive line must be a cohesive unit come week one. There's a lot of moving parts. New left tackle, new right tackle, new left guard. And finally, the offensive line's depth, if injuries do in fact happen, must be 80% of the production you get from the starters. Non-negotiable. And let me tell you why. While the left guard position was below average last year, the Cardinals, still ended the year top 10 rushing. James Conner had a 1,000-yard rushing season. Josh Dobbs had enough time. Kyler Murray had enough time. But this year, with so much riding on the run game setting up the pass game, it's got to be even better than it was last year. Because if they can run the ball, like legitimately, and I've talked last segment, I'll talk this segment, this is going to be, sprinkled in throughout until we get into the middle of the season where we kind of have more of an idea of what's actually happening and not just prognosticating upon it. If the Cardinals can run the ball at will, they can make the playoffs in 2024. I'm not saying they will. I'm not saying the defense is good enough. I'm not saying I'm not saying it, but if the Cardinals are a top 10 rushing team, that means that there's got to be a top 20 total offense, probably a top 15 passing team, because it makes the passing attack so much easier if you're able to pound the ball down the field with not only James Conner, but Trey Benson. And they've got 98 other running backs. You'll throw Kyler Murray in with a couple design runs a game, you'd think, if necessary. And then you've got Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Zay Jones, a comedy of riches. I almost did this segment first, but it's Kyler Murray. This year, when I talked, I believe it was Thursday of last week, I discussed how the cornerback room is the position group that's most directly correlated to wins and losses for the Cardinals in 2024. I meant that. The offensive line is the position group that's most directly tied to competing every week. And that's something that cannot be understated. That's something that needs to be under a microscope today so they can fine-tune and be ready to roll. And say somebody does get injured of the five starters, you don't miss more than 20% of a beat with whoever comes in. Well, I'll tell you what, Kelvin Beachum is going to potentially be an unsung hero of this team, as he has been. I've said Steve, that's one of Steve Keim's best offseason signings. He can play both left tackle and right tackle. Again, not as good. He's older. But the offensive line is going to be more directly correlated to competing every week than they have been in a long time. Because they've got the skill position players in place. They've just got to give Kyler Murray the time to be able to utilize those skill position players in an effort to overcome the inferiority of the defense, which I will discuss next. Locked on Cardinals. What does the Arizona Cardinals defense need to do? Next. This episode of Locked on Cardinals is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. I have a soft spot with LinkedIn. I utilize it a lot. When I was looking for jobs and when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just a job board, though. It's a common misconception for some reason. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. And in a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So I was trying to formulate what I wanted to do with the show, and it's like, okay, what are the expectations? What are the must-haves? What are all these things? And, you're speaking in, it's something that we're so close to finding out so many of the answers that we've been waiting for pretty much since the end of 2022. And now it's going to be shown in real time. No more green ribbons, which were deserved last year. I'm definitely not backtracking on how I framed the entire season last year, where it's how are these young players playing? If this continues, then the Cardinals will be in good shape. If it doesn't, then they won't. Future is now, cable guy. I would do an impression, but it's not good enough. The defense must not drown in 2024. It's very simple. They must not drown. They cannot be bottom 5 in the NFL. Let's just say for total yards, okay? So say they're great against the run but bad against the pass. You'd rather be great against the pass and bad against the run. If they're a top 20 defense, we're talking potential playoffs. But let's run down the question marks. And again, everydayers, you'll hear me qualify this because it's important. And if this is your first listen to Locked On Cardinals, thank you. Maybe make tomorrow your second listen and join the everydayer train. These question marks are different than Steve Keim question marks. These question marks are, how good is this going to be? How long will this take? Not will this work? So let's just, off the top of my dome, what question marks there are on the defensive side of the ball in no particular order. Is Max Melton going to be ready week 1 to take on a prominent role? Is Garrett Williams going to be ready to thrust into action? Using 2023 as a springboard, even though, he missed some time. Will Elijah Jones be a game changer? Is he going to be right in the pine in 2024? Is Sean Murphy-Bunting closer to the 2019-2020 Sean Murphy-Bunting than he was last year in Tennessee? Will BJ Ojulari become a fringe Pro Bowl pass rusher? Is Darius Robinson a true edge? Or is he going to be best used on the interior defensive line, which would make the pass rush even weaker than it is now? Are Bilal Nichols and Justin Jones guys who you can trust, even in a rotational sense, to blow up the pocket from the interior? Are Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson still as anchor-worthy on the defensive side of the ball, where they're the last line of defense and you trust them to be just that? Is Budda Baker old? Is Jalen Thompson ready to take that next step into Pro Bowl level from the strong safety position? Will rookie Dadrian Taylor-Demerson, Rabbit, take over for Budda Baker at some point this year? Let's kind of hold that one to next year. But those are just all. And then, where's Mac Wilson going to play? What is Zaven Collins going to look like? Is he trustworthy? That's it. And that's going through almost every player that's going to start. So if the Cardinals defense can stay above water, if they're not giving up a 30-burger a game for 6 weeks of the season, we're going to be having a very different conversation come bye week. And again, these aren't question marks like, will this work? These are younger player questions like, how long will it take? Or is he ahead of the curve? Will he be ready right away? There's something you can pretty much guarantee. We're not going to find any sort of Marco Wilsons or Control Clarks this year right out the gate, where it's like, not ready. It wasn't Control Clark's fault. They had a terrible secondary last year. It wasn't Marco Wilson's fault. That was poor roster construction. What the Cardinals have now is guys that Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rowlis call their guys. The type of player they want to coach. The type of player that's good for their system. But all of those questions, we're going to find out by midseason who the set and forget guys are. Darius Robinson could come in and be an absolute vision off the edge. And you can play him on the inside. You can blow up the pocket on third and short. Maybe he's like, it depends on what his skill set's going to be at this level and what's going to be needed from him. How opportunistic are the young corners going to be? How smartly, intelligently opportunistic are they going to be instead of just going for interceptions that ends up being a catch and 80-yard touchdown? How much impact on the field is Budda Baker going to make? And I've been in the camp, I've said, extend it. He's not going to garner top-tier safety money. He's an Arizona Cardinal. He's the heart and soul of this defense. Extend him. Do what you didn't do with Tyrann Mathieu. Even though Tyrann Mathieu is probably a better player, was at his peak than Budda Baker was. But they're pretty similar. So when I sculpted this show, that's why I went to those three. Kyler Murray, obviously. Offensive line, because the offensive line is the heartbeat of all of this on offense. It affects James Conner and Trey Benson and Kyler Murray running the ball. If they can run the ball, they could have a top 10, top 12 offense. We're talking potential playoffs. We're talking in the hunt in week 15 on the right side of the frame, of the overlay of showing records, which opens up all of the talent on the outside and in the slot for the passing attack. And if it doesn't, we're going to be having a very different conversation. The defense must stay afloat. The defense cannot be giving up 30 points to the Cardinals scoring 28. That would be probably the worst case scenario. Because in essence, and I don't think it's going to be that bad. I don't think they'll be bottom 5 defense. It, in essence, would be a throwaway year again. Because you can't stop anybody, especially with who they're playing this year. Those are the three big ones. The defense just has to keep up. Kyler Murray has to take that 0-1 jump, where he's a set and forget guy and he's the guy. Because we see it. And the offensive line has to be better than last year. Even though they were average last year, they need to be above average this year. That's where all of this starts. Ossenfort Locked On Cardinals. Ken Summers tomorrow. I said he was going to be on Friday of last week. Ken Summers, formerly of Arizona Republic, and multiple other publications around the Valley. One of the best Phoenix has ever seen. Will join me tomorrow as we preview training camp, talk big picture about the Cardinals, and so much more. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.